All right. So, good evening, afternoon, noon, morning, night, whatever. So, I hope we matched all time zones. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of Debugging on Live. Today, I'm going to do the introduction because Matteo is going to try. is going to
Because you don't
present
know
today.
anything about the topic. So
No, we're not talking about the topic. So we just start with like the easy way in. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Especially because the day we are recording, it's the last day of the week for me, even if it's Tuesday, because I have some national holidays happening. So I can't complain.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you?
So yeah, the last we dropped the last episode, if I remember correctly, because I was on a vacation. Well, I told everyone I'm semi-off and doing home office from Spain. In fact,
Yeah.
I went to Spain doing a few things and helping my father doing a few things in his house. So,
Yeah. And I can assure you that having a friend sending you constantly pictures of the location while you are working is painful. But
oh
just a
yeah, you
random
mean the
thought.
one with the sunsets and the beer? Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That
Sorry.
that was one of them. Yeah, indeed.
Do I feel sorry? No, I don't.
No, of course, of course.
Of course not. So let's try to do the arc from sunsets and beer to the topic of today's session. So, what is our most I mean, aside from sunsets and beer, what is our most beloved tool that we use every day? It's obviously not PowerPoint, but it's Teams. Oh yeah, I told you I bring this PowerPoint jokes. No, today we're gonna today Matteo is walking us through Teams development, basically building apps for Teams with the Teams SDK, because this is his main line of work today. Nowadays, with the modern work, oh God, help me out. Modern Work App Consult is
Yep,
is the name of the
yep,
team here?
yep.
Okay, yeah. So as I said, like this is his day-to-day work now, and I'm very interested to hear how you can get amazing games such as what is the name? What is the perfect name? The bingo one for Teams. All right, the stage is yours. Show me how we do this.
Okay, thank you. So, well, the idea is that very briefly today, rather than I won't do a deep dive on what you can build for Teams. This is something that eventually we can touch in another presentation. But I wanted to talk more about one project that Microsoft released a while ago. They started it more or less 1 year ago, and now it recently reached GA. Which really helps to build experiences for teams, which is the Teams Toolkit. Because building apps for teams is not something really new or based on crazy new technologies, because typically when you're talking about applications for teams, we are talking about bots, and the bots are basically REST APIs with all the complexity added by frameworks like the bot frameworks, but in the end we are talking about a REST API, or we are talking about web apps that runs inside the context of Teams. So from a technology standpoint, it's something that you can build since ages, even before Teams. However, when you want to integrate this kind of experiences into Teams, there's some extra work to do, because you have to deploy some resources on Azure. You have to configure the app for Teams. You have to register application on Azure and stuff like that. And before the Teams Toolkit, these are all operations that you needed to do manually. For example, before the Teams Toolkit, the main tool to work with the Teams application was the Yeoman generator, which is a command line tool that can generate the scaffolding. You can scaffold a project with all the basic building blocks, but then it's up to you to go manually to the Azure portal and register an Azure app, or you have to go to the Azure portal and manually register an Azure bot on the Azure bot service and stuff like that. The Teams Toolkit helps to do these things in a more natural way as part of your developer workflow. And basically, it gives you the option to create some projects with already everything you need to expose a Teams application. For example, you have integration with Teams FX and the Teams SDK, which are these libraries that you can use to understand the context and get information about the current team, or do single sign-on and have a graph client to work with the Microsoft Graph and stuff like that. You can use it to automatically provision and deploy the resources on Azure that you need to run this kind of applications. And you have also full stack debugging. So you can have step-by-step debugging, everything you need to debug your web application. And it has also an integrated tunneling solutions for working with ngrok. Ngrok is this tool that you can use to expose your local host to a public endpoint. And this is a very key requirement when you're working with Microsoft Teams, because let's not forget that when you are in a debugging phase, typically, as I mentioned, since we are talking about web applications, these web applications are running on your local machine, but Teams is an application running in the cloud. So you have to find a way to connect the two of them. And with ngrok, you can achieve this goal. There are two flavors of the Teams Toolkit. One for Visual Studio Code, and this is mainly dedicated to traditional web developers. So when you use the Visual Studio Code version, you get templates to start projects with JavaScript, TypeScript, React, Express, and so on.
I would like to point out the different themes that you are showcasing here.
Yeah, because true developers use Visual Studio Code, indeed. While if instead you are more a .NET developer, the right choice for you is the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio 2022, because in this case you get templates based on .NET. So, for example, all the bots solutions are based on C# and the bot framework, while if you build a tab app, which are the web apps that you run into Teams, they are based on Blazor.
Will the TypeScript and JavaScript templates also be available in the Visual Studio, or are those? No. Okay, interesting.
No,
okay,
it's a very straight difference. So if you are a web developer and you want to use JavaScript, go with code. If you are a .NET developer, go with Visual Studio 2022.
Interesting. Okay. But they will run in the community. You don't need the professional. They will also run the community.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. To build an application for Teams, you need, based if you opt in for Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio 2022, you will need one of these two tools. And you will need also a Microsoft 365 tenant where to deploy your Teams application. If you don't have one, you can use the Microsoft 365 developer portal that can give you a free tenant for testing with a lot of fake data, fake teams, fake channels that you can use to simulate this environment. Optionally,
just one thing to add here. Technically, once you have an Office 365 subscription or an Azure subscription, you will automatically have a Microsoft 365 or Azure AD tenant. They are basically the same. So just in case
the advantage of using the developer subscription is that you get a tenant with a lot of fake data. So when you start Teams, you already have different fake channels with different fake users. So it's easier to simulate scenarios.
True.
Optionally, you need also an Azure subscription. Of course, as long as you run everything locally You don't need the Azure subscription, but if you want to take advantage of the Azure integration, you must have one, because both versions of the toolkit can connect to your Azure subscription and do the deployment for you. There's a key difference between code and Visual Studio, which is the way this Teams Toolkit is made available. So for Visual Studio Code is made available as an extension in the marketplace. So you have to open the marketplace in Visual Studio Code, find the Teams Toolkit and install it. In Visual Studio 2022, instead, it's part of the Visual Studio installer. So you have to enable the ASP.NET web development workload inside the installer. And then in the installation details, you have to enable the optional Microsoft Teams development tools. That's the Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio 2022. So it doesn't come as a separate extension, but it's part of the main Visual Studio installer.
Does it have a requirement on the .NET version? So are we limited to .NET 6, or is it still working with, I don't know, like Core 3.1 or?
So all the projects are created on top of .NET 6 plus .NET Core 3.1. I think it's going out of support very soon, so I wouldn't advise to use .NET Core 3.1.
It's still an LTS, but yeah, that hence my question. So okay, I see.
No,
is it supporting?
But I would say they are all based on 6. You should be able to migrate them to 7 pretty easily.
Okay.
Downgrading them to .NET Core 3.1 might be more challenging, because they are all based, for example, if I think about Blazor, they are all based on the templates for .NET 5 and .NET 6.
I see.
If you go to old versions, you might have a lot of troubles. Instead, moving forward, they should be more straightforward, because the breaking changes aren't that much.
Yeah, because I was asking, because it's the 17.4 update of Visual Studio 2022. And to my knowledge, that also didn't that also update the broad .NET 7 and the Blazor templates for .NET 7?
Yes.
Because so that's probably something you need to keep an eye on.
Okay, this is the version. 17.4 was the version that was released together with .NET 7.
Yeah.
So stop with the slide. I wanted just to show you a couple of demos. In this case, I will focus on the Visual Studio version. And I wanted to share a couple of the advantages of using the Teams Toolkit. And the first demo I will share is about the notification bot. The notification bot is a type of bot that you can build for Teams. And the difference between the notification bot and a regular bot is that a notification bot doesn't react to the user sending a message to the bot, but it reacts to an external actor sending a message through the bot. So the way it works is that basically you expose an API, the application sends a message to this API, and this API triggers a message that is sent to the user. So the scenario is, I don't know, you have
I have a scenario.
Sorry?
I do have a scenario. If your buzzword bingo, if you have the bingo, the bot can announce this to the channel that Matteo or Mark has a bingo.
Exactly. That's a really good example.
They probably should announce this during the all hands meeting.
I will do that, of course. So this is an example of what you get when you create in Visual Studio a new project with the notification bot template. So you get a bot, basically. So this is, as we can see here, it's on the bot framework. So you have the traditional infrastructure setup to connect to the Azure App Active Directory for the single sign-on, the adapter and everything. And then you have a notification controller where basically what you have is that this bot will stay will listen for any communication coming to the API notification endpoint. And whenever you get an HTTP post, we treat this code that's going to basically check every user who has installed the application. And whenever he finds one of these users, is going to send an adaptive card with some content. The template is very basic. So, for example, it ignores completely the payload of the message. So it just reacts to an HTTP post. It doesn't care what's inside the HTTP post. But of course, you can have a message with some JSON payload that you can use to customize the adaptive card that you send to the user. However, so far it's a normal bot, but the real power, the real advantage of the Teams Toolkit is that from here, when you right-click on this project, you have this Teams Toolkit menu where you can do a few things. Like, for example, clicking on Prepare Teams App Dependencies. From here, you can pick up your Microsoft 365 tenant and click Continue. And now the tool is going to automatically go on the portal and provision the bot registration and the Azure Active Directory you need to test this application. So you don't have to do anything manually, but everything is done for you automatically. The only step that you have to do manually is that you have to run and grok, and so that it will generate the URL that it's going to use. But also the URL will be automatically injected by Visual Studio. You don't need to set it up manually.
Neat.
We can see this because now we can get the message that, okay, succeeded. So now I can hit F5. So now it's launching the bot, and as with any bot type of project, it's going to launch locally on localhost.
You can hear that Matteo's computer is really struggling.
Instead of just running it localhost, as you're going to see, it's going to launch Teams. So now we have the Teams installation experience. And sorry, I have to redo this because it opened the wrong browser. I needed to open this one. This one. This is the browser where I have my Microsoft 365 demo tenant. So this is the instance where I needed to run the bot. So let me run the bot again. But as you were seeing, you just don't get but you get an actual deployment on Teams. So now we will see the store opening up, and we will be asked to install the Teams application on my Teams tenant.
I see. Also, your computer really is struggling when you hit build.
A few seconds for Teams to start. Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing that it's reporting some connection. No, now it says that the connection is good.
I think it was just the CPU maxing out, and then browser versus Teams. This is basically a fight of two heavyweight champions. It's
not a good combination.
No.
So I hope you still see the screen, but basically now I'm prompted to install the application. So I just click Add to install the bot on my account. And now, since I have, and what happened is that also if I open the bot framework page, which is the old portal to manage bots. you can see
By the way, this
that here
framework was
I have.
Go ahead.
So here, automatically, the deployment on Azure has created this, set this registration for me. And you can see that automatically the URL that you see here as messaging endpoint is the URL that was created here by ngrok. And here I can also see the Azure app registration that Visual Studio created for me. So also in this case, I already have an Azure app registration that I can use.
Yeah.
Yes. So I can use this for doing single sign-on, for example.
Got it.
Quick question. To test this here, I can just
one thing. So I see that you so the bot was registered using the old portal for the bot framework. Is it also registered in the bot services blade of the Azure portal, or is it something different? So could you go to the Azure portal and see the registered bot service there as well?
No. So, or to be more precisely, so if you are doing local debugging and local development, the bot is registered in the old portal. And the reason is that because it's the only way you can do this without needing an Azure subscription. When instead you choose to deploy the bot on Azure, it will create an Azure bot service registration, a full bot service registration on Azure. So now we can do this basically just sending a post HTTP request on the ngrok endpoint. So if everything goes well, you can see that when I hit send, I should be able to see a notification popping up here in the bot. So from an external application, I was able to dispatch a notification to the user. Again, other than the bot experience, which is pretty standard, the real advantage of using the Teams Toolkit is that I was able to automatically take care of the Azure ID registration, the bot service registration, and all these kind of things. In a similar way, let's say that I want to bring this into a more real environment, I can just right-click on the project, choose Teams Toolkit, and then I can provision in the cloud, which is going to create the resources on Azure you need to host this bot, and deploy to the cloud to actually copy and provision this bot on these resources. I won't do this in real time because it takes a while, but I can show you on my Azure subscription that this is the resource group that was created by the toolkit. So from here, you can see that I have an Azure bot, a managed identity, an app service, and an app service plan. So everything is already deployed and set up. You can see also here I have created by Teams FX as tag. So this is created by the Teams Toolkit. And if I want to test this, I can right-click Teams Toolkit, preview in Teams. This is going to open Teams again. And this time, as you can see, I've stopped the debugger. So the debugger is not running. Now it's going to propose me to install and test the application running from my actual Azure instance instead of my local host, basically. So now I will get the installation experience. And now if I want to test this, I can just go to the app service. I copy the URL once it loads up. Okay, the bot is here. Now, if the portal decides to wake up, wake up. Okay. So now this is the URL of my bot. So if everything goes well and I didn't break anything, I should be able to go to Postman and just change the URL from the ngrok one to the app service one, hit send, and I should be able to see the notification coming up here. So the same bot I was running locally, now it's running on Azure just with a one-click deployment. Behind this project, this is possible because this project comes with a lot of bicep templates that are used to deploy and provision the resources. And one of the nice things that the Teams Toolkit does is that, as you can see here, I have two files, one called dev and one called local, which includes all the configuration of the Azure resources or the local resources, so that it's easy for me to maintain multiple environments. So I can keep using the same project to press F5 and do local deployment, but I can also quickly deploy my updates on Azure. This is made possible because every Teams app is described by a manifest, and the manifest is the one that describes all the entry points of the application. But this manifest, this is the manifest. But as you can see in the manifest, most of the important things, like, I don't know, the bot ID, the bot domain, and so on, are marked with placeholders. And these placeholders are replaced in real time based if I'm generating the app for the dev environment or for the local environment or for the production environment. So Teams Toolkit helps you also to maintain multiple environments for the same application.
I do have two questions, and they're kind of connected. The first one is, I mean, that seems to be the right toolkit for our podcast, because you always build on your machine and deploy it directly to production from there. So if you want to debug, you are debugging on live, which is totally what we are looking for. But seriously, question number one is, could you put this into a CI/CD environment in a sense of, I don't know, just putting this stuff to Azure DevOps, GitHub, have a workflow? I mean, I understand that you just build a regular .NET application, but there are more steps involved. Can these steps be automated? Is there some support for that?
So there are two parts of the answer. The first one is that yes, because all the provisioning that has been done by Visual Studio was done through a command line interface tool called TeamsFX CLI. And basically it's a CLI interface to perform provisioning operation against Teams. So you can easily integrate this into your deployment pipeline. Having said that, the Teams manifest is just a pointer to the origin, to the source of where your project is hosted, because one key difference between a Teams app and, I don't know, a mobile app is that a Teams app doesn't contain any binaries, because a Teams app is actually a web application that you are hosting somewhere else. So the manifest just describes okay, you are hosting a bot, this is the bot ID. Or you are hosting a web app, this is the URL of the web app. So typically what happens is that you deploy the Teams app once, and then since the Teams app is pointing to the bot ID or to the web resource, if you update the web app or if you update the bot, you don't have to redeploy the Teams app. Automatically, it will pick up the latest updates. So yes, you can automate this with TeamsFX CLI, but in reality, you deploy the app once, and then with CI/CD, you update the web app or the bot, and automatically the bot on Teams will use the latest version.
I understand. Okay, so that has basically also answered my second question, which would be what would be the process of updating the apps in Teams, right? Because you had to manually click installing the application. I don't know if that is your part of. It's probably more infrastructure. Can you basically also make sure that this app is automatically appearing as one of the organizational enterprise app part as Teams? So basically,
So this is something that you do as well with the Teams FX CLI or through the Teams developer portal.
I see.
So you have basically 3 options. You can either generate a zip package that you can give to the administrator, and the administrator will manually upload internally. You can deploy the app to the current organization tenant, so that then the administrator will have to approve it and they can deploy it to the whole organization. Or the first option, which however requires a little bit more work, is I'm an ISV and I want to make the app available on the Teams store for all the customers all around the world.
So classic SaaS multi-tenancy scenario.
Exactly. This is doable through the Teams portal. Requires a little bit more work because if for an internal app it's enough for the administrator of the Teams tenant to approve it, for a global distribution of the app, you have to go through a submission process, a checklist. There's a more careful process because the app will be made globally available to all the customers all around the world.
I understand. Okay, interesting.
The only reason why you would need to update the manifest and upload a new app on Teams is if you decide to enrich the app with new features. So, for example, your app comes with a bot, and then in version 2, you decide to add also a web tab or a meeting app as part of the same experience. You will need to deploy an updated version of the Teams app because in the manifest, you will need to declare that your app now is not only a bot, but there's only a Teams meeting component, for example.
Okay.
Because one important information is that a Teams app doesn't necessarily match one project, because the same app can contain a bot, a tab, a meeting, because you can have a single app that drives different experiences based on the scenario. For example, the YouTube app is an app that you can use it as a web app because you can pin it to a channel, but you can add it also to a meeting so that all the people can see the same YouTube video. This is the same app, but with 2 different experiences.
Oh, okay. And my last question is the same. So this is probably a common scenario that you want to have the SSO or the credentials from the kind of like Teams environment. This is basically how you would do this with the bot framework by just getting this from Teams. Is there any help from the toolkit, or is this something that you do manually?
No, it's built in. So the Teams Toolkit comes with the Teams FX and Teams SDK library, which handles the single sign-on. So, for example, in case, for example, of our tab app, you have the Teams FX library where you can get a graph client which is already authenticated with the user logged into Teams. So you can perform graph operations without asking the user to authenticate again. They are already logged in with Teams, and you can reuse the same credentials. Now, for the sake of time, I won't be able to do the demo because we are about to wrap up. But for example, if in the Teams Toolkit you decide to create a Teams tab app, so a web app posted into Teams, and you press F5 to deploy it, the first thing you will notice is that the web app tells you welcome and your name, because the name is taken from the logged user.
Cool. So there's no need to basically build bots, Teams bots or Teams apps the old way. It's the way would be the Teams Toolkit nowadays, and just
Yeah, I would say
Basically, you
yes,
have the
because
choice between
it helps to save a lot of time, because
Yeah.
the scaffolding of this project was doable also with Yeoman, for example.
Mhm.
But you needed all the you were missing all the infrastructure. So
Yeah.
you needed to go to the Azure portal and create the app
Mhm.
registration for single sign-on, and then go to Yeoman and share the ID of that app. Do the same with the bot service.
Yeah.
Instead, as you've seen in my demo, I pressed F5, I clicked on prepare dependencies, and my bot registration and my AAD app were already there.
Mhm. Very interesting. So,
See,
I think
no PowerPoint this time.
no,
Real
no
code.
Also, I mean, so everyone is waiting basically for the buzzword bingo game in Teams. So this would basically make this a weekend project then.
Yeah, this will be our pet project. Yeah.
Okay. It is our pet project then, it seems.
Yeah, since we have a lot of free time, I mean, why not?
I mean, you have vacation now. You're on vacation now, so you can basically start.
Yeah, for 3 days.
building.
So, I mean,
Will you be back before Christmas?
yes, of course. So next Monday I'll be back.
All right. So there will be another episode before Christmas.
Yeah. Unless my wife decides to make a surprise, and my second daughter coming up earlier than expected. But yeah, I will be here before Christmas.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much for telling us how to use the Teams Toolkit. That was very helpful. I mean, it's not my line of work anymore, but I have worked with bots on Teams before, and that was always a bit painful. It seems it's much easier now, so that's a good thing. And hopefully Microsoft Speech will drive the adoption of Teams.
End of the Microsoft Speech.
Of course.
All right. So see you at the next episode, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.